Okay, class. So, before we move further into the respiratory physiology, I would like to do a quick recap of the basic anatomy of the lungs. You have learned this in anatomy class, but I think this lecture warrants a little preview. So, we do see two lungs, right? And as we notice here, the lungs are covered by a double-layered serous membrane. And the layer that touches the lung, so if I label this layer right here, this is called the visceral pleura. And the outer layer that actually lines the body wall, this is called the parietal pleura. So, lungs is surrounded by a double-layered serous membrane called pleura, and the layer that touches the surface of the lung, or the inner layer, is called the visceral pleura. The outer layer that touches or lines the body wall is called the parietal pleura. Good. In between the parietal pleura and the visceral pleura, do you see a space here? This space is called pleural cavity, also known as intrapleural cavity. It's the same thing. So right here, you take a little bit of the pleura and you blow it up. You do see the inner visceral pleura, which is touching the lung itself, and then we have an outer parietal pleura, and in between this area is the pleural cavity. Very good. Few more things about the pleural cavity. Remember, the pleural cavity is a potential space. Pleural cavity is a potential space. What do we mean by potential space? Meaning it's a super thin space. However, it has a potential to grow bigger. Let's imagine a person gets stabbed, right? If a person gets stabbed in the chest cavity, there can be, the pleura might be damaged, and then the atmospheric air can come in, and this pleural cavity can get bigger. Also, blood can accumulate in the pleural cavity, and the potential space can become a big real space. So the pleural cavity is a potential space. What is there in the pleural cavity? Within the pleural cavity, there is a serous fluid. There is serous fluid, which is very oily and greasy type of fluid. And this greasy fluid prevents the two layers, the visceral layer and the visceral pleura and the parietal pleura, from sticking to each other. Imagine, had this fluid been watery, these two layers would stick to each other. We don't want that. We want these layers to kind of slide against each other, and that's why the serous fluid that is found in the pleural cavity has a very greasy, oily texture that prevents friction. All right. So now we are looking actually inside the lung. So if I have to draw out, so this is your lung, right? And if you kind of dig deeper, what do you see? So let's see. So we are looking into the larynx. This is the voice box. Let's not worry about this right now. We do see the trachea, right? The trachea is lined by tracheal cartilages. We do see those, which are ring-like, C-shaped, not ring, which are C-shaped cartilages. The trachea at here, so this point of bifurcation is called carina, if you remember from anatomy. So at this point, the trachea bifurcates. Do you see that? So it branches into this and this. What are these two segments called? They are called bronchi, plural, bronchus, singular. So we have a left main or left primary bronchus and a right primary bronchus. And then these bronchi will further divide. Let me see if I can change color. That would be wonderful. Then let me minimize. Okay, it's important to draw here. Okay, so I want you to notice that the primary bronchi on either side divide into these smaller branches. These are secondary bronchi. The secondary bronchi then divides into tertiary bronchi. Let's highlight those. They divide into these ones, and these ones are called tertiary bronchi, as I mark them in green. And then we do see that the tertiary bronchi divides and redivides many times. So I'll just mark all these with black. Do you see how many times they're branching and rebranching and again branching? Do you see that? Essentially they branch like 15 to 20 times, but we don't have to know that. We don't have to remember that. Just know that the primary, we have the trachea, which divides into primary bronchi. The primary divides into secondary. Secondary divides into tertiary. The tertiary then divides and redivides to form a tree-like pattern. Do you see the tree-like pattern? And this whole thing, this whole tree-like pattern, well, I should erase this part. This whole tree-like pattern is called bronchial tree. That's our bronchial tree. Good. Now, listen carefully now. I will label something with red. I want you to focus at these teeny tiny parts, or the very distal end of these branches. These parts that I marked with red, they are called bronchioles. What are they called? They are called bronchioles. Bronchioles. Rupa, how are they different from the bronchi? Well, bronchi have, okay, let me write this down. Oops. Bronchi, if you think of the bronchi, they have these hyaline cartilage patches. Do you see? They have the hyaline cartilage patches. And they have less smooth muscle. If you look at the bronchioles, how are they different? Remember, bronchioles they are narrower. First of all, they are narrow. They are narrower as compared to the bronchi. They do not have hyaline cartilage, so no hyaline cartilage. And they have more smooth muscle. They have more smooth muscle. And why is this smooth muscle really important in case of the bronchi? Well, think about it. In case of the bronchioles, these smooth muscles, listen carefully, these smooth muscles that wrap around the bronchioles help in the process of bronchoconstriction and bronchodilation. So this smooth muscle helps in the process of bronchoconstriction and, I don't have space, so I'm writing here, and bronchodilation. Okay, meaning constriction and dilation of the bronchioles is facilitated by the smooth muscles. So let's take a look. Okay, so as I mentioned before, bronchioles have smooth muscles wrapping them. So in this picture that you see, do you see the red ribbon-like structures wrapping around some bronchioles? So these red tapes, these are nothing but smooth muscles. So the red tapes are smooth muscles that wrap around the bronchioles. And remember, as I mentioned in my last slide, these smooth muscles help in the process of bronchoconstriction and bronchodilation. If you notice, these bronchioles, they do not have any cartilage, no tracheal cartilage. Good. And then these bronchioles in further divide. We are actually not focusing too much on the anatomy. We have different types of bronchioles, terminal bronchioles, respiratory bronchioles. At this point, don't worry about that. Just know that bronchioles have smooth muscles. They help in bronchoconstriction and dilation, they are not having any tracheal cartilage. And then these bronchioles divide into small ducts. Do you see these ducts? These ducts are called alveolar ducts that lead to these pocket-like structures. Do you see these small balloon or pocket-like structures? These are called alveolus. Alveolus is singular, and when we say alveoli, that's plural. So the alveolar ducts lead to alveolus, singular, alveoli, plural. Very interesting. What else do we see? Look at each alveolus, please do. If you look at each alveolus like we see here, actually let me use a different color. As you see here, do you see that it is wrapped around by a capillary bed or a capillary network? Yes, we see that. These capillary net around the alveolus is super important. Why? Because gas exchange that we will talk about takes place at this place. So we have this alveolus surrounded by this capillary network, and it is here that we will have gas exchange. Remember, we have not talked about gas exchange yet. We just looked into ventilation. Okay. So are we good with the anatomy here? If you have any question, feel free to email me. Next, what we will do is we will zoom into each capillary. So we will blow up a, sorry, did I say capillary? Sorry. We will zoom into each alveolus, and we will look at the different types of cells that are found within each alveolus. So I'll just, because it's already 12 minutes, I'll stop here and then I'll start with a new video.